Captain Eric Dalton sat in the small cockpit of his ship, staring at the deep blue of space through the thick glass. He had traveled far from Earth, farther than most humans ever dared to go. The planet Zyphera loomed ahead, a strange world of green oceans and towering crystal mountains that seemed to glow under the light of its twin suns. Eric had been sent as a diplomat to negotiate peace, but he knew the job was dangerous. Humans and Zypherans had been in conflict for decades. Small battles and skirmishes had left many dead on both sides, and neither species fully trusted the other. Eric adjusted his uniform and ran a hand through his short brown hair. He had been in the military for years before becoming a diplomat, and he had learned that calm and patience often mattered more than strength. Still, he could not hide the knot in his stomach. Diplomacy with humans was one thing, but negotiating with aliens who thought differently, who had technology far beyond humans, was something else entirely. He glanced at the small display in front of him, which showed Zyphera's landing platform, surrounded by ships of alien design. Sleek, silver, and curving like living creatures, they made the human ships look clumsy in comparison. The ship shook as it entered Zyphera's atmosphere. Eric gripped the armrest, his knuckles white. The view outside shifted from blue sky to green forests and sparkling cities. The planet was alive with colors he had never seen. Tall towers rose like crystals, and rivers shone like liquid glass. He remembered the mission briefing on the way here. Meet Queen Zalara and attempt to sign a peace treaty before tensions reached a breaking point. He also remembered the warning. Zypherans did not easily forgive human mistakes. The ship touched down smoothly on the landing platform. Eric stepped out, feeling the soft hum of the planet under his feet. Zyphera's air was clean, and it carried a faint scent of flowers he could not name. Guards in shimmering armor approached, their faces hidden behind helmets, but their posture suggested authority. One of them stepped forward, speaking in a voice that sounded strange but strangely melodic. A translator in Eric's ear converted the words into English. "Welcome, Captain Dalton," the guard said. "The Queen awaits you." Eric nodded and followed the guard into a large corridor that stretched farther than his eyes could see. The walls were smooth, with lines of light tracing patterns that seemed to shift as he walked. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him. The corridor opened into a massive hall. Crystals floated in the air, emitting a soft glow. At the far end, on a raised platform, stood a figure that made Eric stop in his tracks. Queen Zalara. She was taller than any human woman, with skin that shimmered like polished metal. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes were deep purple, intelligent and piercing. She wore a gown of flowing material that changed colors as she moved, reflecting the light of the floating crystals. Around her, advisors and nobles stood silently, their faces unreadable. The air seemed heavier here, filled with expectation. Eric swallowed and stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly. "I am honored to be here." Zalara's eyes studied him for a long moment. Then, she spoke, her voice calm, but commanding. The translator converted her words. "Captain Dalton," she said, "we have been at war for too long. Humans and Zypherans have spilled blood that cannot be forgotten easily. You come here to speak of peace, but peace has a price." Eric nodded, careful to remain respectful. "I understand, Your Majesty. I am here to listen and negotiate whatever is necessary to end the conflict." Zalara's gaze narrowed slightly. Then, unexpectedly, she raised a hand, and the hall went quiet. All eyes turned to a figure stepping forward. It was a young woman, tall and strong, yet with a grace that seemed natural. Her hair was deep violet, and her eyes sparkled like jewels. She moved without hesitation, but there was a confidence that made Eric's stomach tighten. "This is Princess Lyra," Zalara said. "She will be part of these negotiations." Eric's eyes widened. He had expected diplomats and advisors, not the Queen's daughter herself. Lyra stopped a few steps away from him, her eyes studying him in silence. There was curiosity there, but also something like caution. He straightened, keeping his expression neutral. Then, without warning, Zilara spoke again, and the words made Eric's heart stop. "If you want peace," she said, her voice steady, "you will marry my daughter." Eric blinked. The translator repeated the words in his ear, and for a moment, he could not process them. Marry the princess? He had come to negotiate a treaty, not a marriage. This was not part of the plan. His mind raced. Was this a demand? A test? Or something else entirely? He could feel the eyes of the court on him, waiting for his response. Eric began, but words failed him. He had never faced anything like this. Zalara's gaze did not waver. "Think carefully, human," she said. "Refusal is not an option if you want peace." The silence was thick. Eric looked at Lyra. She remained calm, almost serene. But her eyes were sharp. There was no immediate hostility, but he could sense her judgment. He had to find a way to respond that would keep the negotiations alive without angering the queen. "I understand your position, Your Majesty," Eric said finally, keeping his voice steady. "This is unusual for me, but I will consider it. I am here to serve peace above all else." Zalara's lips curved slightly, a subtle smile, as if she had expected this response. "Good. You will meet with Lyra privately. There are matters to discuss. If you fail to understand each other, peace will be impossible." Eric nodded and followed Lyra into a smaller chamber off the main hall. The room was bright with natural light and decorated with plants that seemed to grow without soil, floating gently in midair. Lyra stood near a window, looking out at the alien city below. "You are quiet," she said finally, her voice calm but direct. Most humans would have protested, argued, or tried to escape. You did none of that. Eric stepped closer, trying to appear confident. "I do not want war, Princess Lyra. I have seen what it does to people. I will do whatever I can to prevent it." Lyra turned to look at him fully. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked. "Marriage is not just a ceremony here. It is a bond of loyalty, of trust, and of responsibility. You would be tied to my people as much as to me." Eric nodded slowly. "I understand, and I respect that. I will need to learn everything about your people, your customs, and your expectations." Lyra studied him in silence for a moment. Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Very well," she said. "We begin tomorrow. You will need to prove that you are worthy not just to my mother, but to me and to our people." Eric felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He had survived battles, negotiations, and near-death experiences, but this was different. This was not a war he could fight with weapons. He would have to fight with understanding, intelligence, and patience. And he was entering a world that was alien in every sense of the word. As he left the chamber, Eric glanced back at Lyra. There was something in her eyes, curiosity, intelligence, perhaps even a hint of challenge. He knew that the coming days would test him in ways he had never imagined. He had come to Zyphara for peace, and now peace came with a condition he could never have expected. The alien city stretched out before him, shining under the twin suns. Somewhere in those towers and rivers, human and Zypharan lives hung in the balance, and at the center of it all was a demand that could change everything. Marry the princess. Eric Dalton had faced danger before, but nothing like this. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and prepared for the trials ahead. Peace was a fragile thing, and it rested on his ability to survive, to understand, and perhaps to win the trust of a people very different from his own. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Eric Dalton woke early the next morning. The sunlight on Zyphara was different from anything he had seen on Earth. It was softer, warmer, and somehow made everything around him seem alive. He dressed carefully, wearing the formal uniform the Queen had provided. Today was the day he would meet Princess Lyra again, alone, as Zalara had demanded. He walked through the crystal corridors of the palace, the walls glowing faintly with light that seemed to move like water. Guards stood at attention, their eyes hidden behind their helmets. But their presence reminded him that he was far from home and far from safety. Eric felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. One wrong move could ruin the chance for peace and possibly cost him his life. When he reached the chamber where he had met Lyra yesterday, she was already waiting. She stood by the window, her violet hair catching the light, her arms folded, and her posture straight and proud. She looked at him as if testing him, trying to see past the calm expression he forced onto his face. "Good morning, Captain Dalton," Lyra said softly. "I hope you slept well." Eric nodded. "I did, thank you. And you?" Lyra shrugged slightly. "Sleep is not as easy for me when the future of my people is at stake. But you seem calm. That is unusual. For a human in my situation." Eric smiled faintly. "I have faced dangerous situations before. But this is different. I have to earn your trust. Not just your mother's." Lyra's eyes studied him, sharp and curious. "Many humans come here thinking that courage alone will earn respect. Some try to impress with weapons or words. You are different. You speak carefully, but with purpose." Eric felt a small surge of pride. It was good that she noticed, but he knew appearances could be deceiving. "I want to understand your people," he said. "I want to learn. I know words are not enough, but I will do my best." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then we begin. Today, you will see how my people live, how we work, and what we value. You will not just sit in this room and speak. You will observe, participate, and learn. That is the only way to understand us." Eric followed Lyra out of the chamber and into the palace halls. The corridors were wide and smooth, lined with lights and floating plants. The walls shimmered softly, and Eric felt a strange sense of calm despite the tension. Lyra led him to a large courtyard filled with Zyphorans moving with grace and purpose. Some trained in combat, others worked on strange machines that floated in the air. "Observe," Lyra said. "This is a daily training area. Every citizen contributes to our strength, our knowledge, and our survival. Humans often underestimate discipline and cooperation. Here, we value both above all else." Eric watched as the Zyphorans practiced. Their movements were precise and fluid. Some wielded weapons that glowed with energy, while others controlled the floating machines with gestures. It was clear they were powerful, intelligent, and focused. Eric felt a mixture of awe and caution. These were not people to underestimate. Lyra guided him to a small platform overlooking the courtyard. "Do you see how they work together? Every action has a purpose. Every movement is calculated. Humans are strong, yes, but we are patient. We are prepared for generations. That is our advantage." Eric nodded. "I see, and I can learn from this. Perhaps some of these methods could help humans as well." Lyra looked at him, surprised. "You are willing to learn from us?" "Most humans refuse. They only think of their own ways. I believe that peace requires understanding," Eric said firmly. "I cannot force it. I cannot demand it. I must earn it." Lyra smiled faintly, a small expression that softened her sharp features. "You speak wisely, Captain Dalton. But words are not enough. You will experience our ways today. You will join the training." Eric blinked. "Training?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. You will train with us. You will learn endurance, focus, and discipline. These are not just physical skills. They are the core of our culture." He hesitated for a moment, thinking of his human military training. It was different, but he was confident in his abilities. "Very well, I will try." Lyra led him to a small group of Zyphorans who nodded in greeting. The training was simple to start, but demanding in execution. Eric had to move, balance, and react in ways he had never done before. The ground shifted beneath his feet as if alive, testing his stability. Energy fields created obstacles that required him to think quickly. He stumbled several times, earning small glances of surprise and amusement from Lyra and the trainers. "You are stronger than you realize," Lyra said. "But your mind is still slow. Concentrate. Every movement has a purpose." Eric nodded, breathing heavily. He adjusted his stance and tried again. Slowly, he began to anticipate the shifting ground and energy fields. By the end of the first session, he could move smoothly, though sweat dripped from his forehead and his muscles ached. Lyra approached him, her expression thoughtful. "You are not perfect, but you improve quickly. That is rare. Humans often give up when faced with difficulty." Eric smiled faintly. "I do not give up easily. I have faced impossible situations before. I can adapt." Lyra's eyes softened slightly. "Adaptation is important. It is how we survive. You may not understand our full ways yet, but you have potential. Adaptation is important." After the training, Lyra took him to the palace gardens. Floating plants surrounded them, and soft music, produced by unknown instruments, filled the air. The garden was peaceful, almost magical. Eric felt some of his tension ease. "Now," Lyra said, "you will learn about our culture. Our people value honor, loyalty, and knowledge. You must understand this if you hope to live among us as a partner to our people. Marriage here is not just personal, it is political. It is responsibility." Eric listened carefully as Lyra explained the customs, the ceremonies, and the values of her people. She spoke plainly, without embellishment, and Eric realized how much care went into every aspect of Xiferan life. Their traditions were strict but meaningful. Every action had a purpose, and every person contributed to the whole. As the day passed, Eric found himself talking with Lyra more openly. She asked about Earth, about human values, and about his life. He told her simple stories of Earth cities, human teamwork, and battles he had survived. Lyra listened intently, sometimes questioning, sometimes laughing quietly at his explanations. He began to see her not just as a princess, but as a person with her own thoughts, hopes, and fears. By evening, they returned to the palace. Eric felt exhausted but alive in a way he had not expected. He had faced physical challenges, learned new ways of thinking, and begun to understand the culture of a people so different from humans. Lyra had tested him, pushed him, and even challenged him, but he realized that he had earned some measure of her respect. As they reached the chamber where the queen would see them next, Lyra spoke quietly. "You did well today. Not perfect, but well. My mother will judge you further, but I see potential." Eric nodded. "Thank you, Princess. I only hope I can continue to earn your trust." Lyra smiled faintly. "Trust is earned through actions, Captain Dalton. Words are only the beginning. Tomorrow, you will see more of our people, and more challenges await. If you survive them, you may begin to understand the true meaning of peace on Xiphera." Eric felt a mix of fear and determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was ready. He had come to Xiphera for peace, and now he understood that peace required patience, courage, and understanding beyond anything he had known. As he prepared for sleep, he thought of Lyra. She was strong, intelligent, and different from anyone he had ever met. She was also the key to the future of two worlds. He knew he had to be careful, but he also felt a spark of something else: curiosity, admiration, and perhaps the beginning of respect that could grow into something more. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new lessons, and new opportunities to prove himself. Eric Dalton was ready to face them, step by step, knowing that every action he took could decide the fate of humans and Xiferans alike. And somewhere deep in his mind, he could not deny the truth. He wanted to earn not just peace, but the respect of the princess who held the key to it. Eric Dalton woke before the sun rose over Xiphera. Today was different. Lyra had told him he would face trials, and he could feel the weight of expectation pressing on him. These trials were not just for show. They were meant to test his courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Eric knew that failure was not an option. Peace between humans and Xiferans, and perhaps his own survival, depended on it. Lyra met him in the main hall, dressed in her training attire. She looked calm, almost serene. But Eric could sense the sharpness in her eyes. She nodded toward him, and without a word, led him outside to a large arena at the edge of the palace grounds. The arena was unlike anything Eric had seen. It was vast, open to the sky, with obstacles that seemed to appear and disappear at random. Floating platforms hovered above, and strange energy fields shimmered in the air, forming paths that required careful timing to cross. Other Xiferans watched from the edges, silent but attentive. This was no ordinary training ground. It was a place where skill and wit were tested together. Lyra turned to him. These trials are not just physical. They are mental and emotional as well. You must think, react, and remain calm. Many fail because they let fear guide them. You will start with the first challenge, the path of balance. Eric nodded, his hands clenching slightly. He stepped onto the first floating platform. It tilted and shifted under his weight. He took a deep breath, focusing on the rhythm of his steps. Slowly, carefully, he moved forward, adjusting to every shift, every tremble. Sweat formed on his forehead, but he kept his eyes on the next platform. Halfway through, a sudden jolt sent him off balance. He grabbed a glowing rope that appeared from thin air, swinging himself back onto solid ground. Lyra watched silently, her expression unreadable. Eric felt his heart pounding, but he continued. Step by step, he crossed the final platform and reached the other side. You survived the first test, Lyra said. Good. But the next one will challenge your mind. Eric wiped the sweat from his brow. I am ready. Lyra led him to a chamber filled with floating orbs, each glowing a different color. This is the maze of knowledge, she explained. Each orb contains a puzzle, a problem you must solve. You cannot touch the wrong orb, or it will reset the challenge. You must use logic, observation, and intuition. Eric studied the orbs carefully. Some had symbols he had never seen, while others had patterns that reminded him of human mathematics. He began with a simple one. Touching it lightly, a puzzle appeared, a series of lights that needed to be activated in a certain order. Eric focused, analyzing the sequence, and managed to solve it after a few attempts. One by one, he solved the remaining puzzles, feeling a growing confidence. Lyra's eyes softened slightly. You are intelligent, she said. That is rare for humans. Many act without thinking. You pause, observe, and then act. That will serve you well. Eric nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Thank you. I only want to understand your people, Princess. I want to do what is right. Lyra studied him for a moment, then led him to the next challenge. This one was different. A small forest of alien trees, glowing faintly in green and blue, filled the area. Eric had to navigate through it while avoiding traps that could injure or slow him down. It was a test of perception and agility. The forest was beautiful, but dangerous. Strange vines moved on their own, and soft glowing lights sometimes concealed hidden pits. Eric moved carefully, using his military training to anticipate danger. Several times, he had to leap or dodge to avoid falling into hidden traps. His heart raced, but he pushed forward, focusing on the goal. Halfway through the forest, a low growl echoed from the shadows. Eric froze. From behind a glowing tree, a creature emerged. It was larger than a human, with multiple limbs and sharp claws, but it moved with intelligence, watching him carefully. Eric realized this was part of the trial. He did not attack immediately. Instead, he observed the creature's movements, noting its rhythm. Slowly, he backed away, keeping his eyes on it. The creature followed, testing his patience. Eric remembered Lyra's words. Fear would lead to failure. He stayed calm, and after several tense minutes, the creature stepped aside, allowing him to pass. Lyra watched from a distance, impressed. You face the unknown without panic. That is rare. Many would have fought blindly and failed. Eric continued through the forest, finally reaching a clearing where Lyra waited. You have done well, she said. But there is one more challenge for today. One that will test your loyalty. Eric felt a knot in his stomach. Loyalty was different from skill or intelligence. It required trust, dedication, and courage beyond fear. Lyra led him to a chamber with a large pool of glowing water. At the center is a symbol of my people's trust. You must retrieve it, but the water is guarded. Not by creatures, but by illusions. You must see what is real and what is false. Only then can you succeed. Eric approached the pool, studying the ripples. Shapes began to form in the water. Images of humans, Zypherans, friends, and enemies. Some tried to speak to him. Others moved threateningly. He realized these were illusions meant to distract him, to test his mind. He focused, remembering his purpose: peace, understanding, and the trust of the princess and her people. Slowly, he waded into the pool, ignoring the illusions. Some images tried to trick him, showing Lyra in danger or mocking him for failure. Eric forced himself to see past them, concentrating on the glowing symbol at the center. Step by step, he reached it and lifted it from the water. The illusions vanished instantly, and the chamber was silent. Lyra stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and admiration. You have passed the trials for today. You have shown courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Few humans could have done this. Eric exhaled deeply, feeling exhaustion in every muscle. I did what I had to do, he said. For peace. For your people. For you. Lyra studied him carefully. You are not perfect, but you are human. That is enough. You have potential. And more importantly, you are willing to learn, to adapt, and to endure. That is rare among your kind. For the first time, Eric felt a connection beyond the trials. Lyra's respect was not forced, it was earned, and he realized that respect could grow into trust, and perhaps something more, though he did not yet know how to name it. As they walked back to the palace, Lyra spoke quietly. You surprised me today, Captain Dalton. I expected a human to fail at least once, but you did not. You faced fear, confusion, and challenge, and you prevailed. That is important, because tomorrow will be harder. Eric nodded. I am ready. I will do whatever is necessary. Lyra smiled faintly, a small but genuine expression. I believe you. But you must remember our people watch closely. Every action, every choice, every word matters. You must not only survive, but earn their trust as well. That is harder than the trials themselves. Back in his quarters, Eric reflected on the day. He had faced danger, challenge, and tests he had never imagined. He had learned about Zyfara's people, their discipline, intelligence, and strength. And he had earned a small measure of Lyra's respect, which felt like the first step toward understanding the alien world. He thought of the Queen's words. If he wanted peace, he would marry Lyra. The idea still shocked him, but he realized that the trials were preparing him, not just for marriage, but for partnership with a people he barely understood. Peace was fragile, and trust even more so. He knew he had to prove himself, not through words alone, but through actions. As night fell over Zyfara, Eric stared out at the glowing city. The twin suns had set, leaving the crystal towers shimmering under the stars. He felt a mixture of exhaustion, excitement, and determination. The path ahead was dangerous, filled with trials he could not yet imagine, but for the first time, he felt a sense of belonging, not fully human, not fully Zypharan, but somewhere in between, striving to connect both worlds. Eric Dalton had survived the first set of trials. He had faced fear, tested his mind, and proven loyalty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he now understood that his greatest battles would not be against creatures or machines, but against misunderstanding, mistrust, and the walls between humans and Zypherans. And somewhere, he knew, Lyra was watching. She had tested him, challenged him, and guided him. But she had also begun to trust him, and trust, he realized, was the most valuable thing a human could earn on Zyphera. Eric lay down, exhausted but determined. The trials were far from over, but he had taken the first steps. He was learning, adapting, and surviving, and with each step, he was closer to peace, closer to understanding, and closer to the princess who held the key to both.